pop your hand up if you've ever had something go wrong in your life that completely took the wind out of your sails. Fantastic. And put your hand up again if you've ever seen someone else go through something similar and they seemed completely unfazed. The difference there is resilience. Now, there's often a perception that resilience is either something you have naturally or you don't, but it's a skill that can be learned like any other skill. And I liken it to, we go to the gym to build and maintain physical strength, and we can actually build resilience exactly the same way, but it does take keeping on doing it, and much like if we stop going to the gym, we lose it. So it's something we need to keep doing. Also, often the bigger the challenges you face, the more resilient you become. And it's just like if you look at an archer doing archery, you know, the further back that bow's pulled, when you let it go, the faster it's propelled forward. So the times where you're the most uncomfortable, you're under the most pressure, you feel the most stressed, are often the gem of a time where you're going to actually get the most out of it. So to give you an illustration of resilience in practice, I'd like to just share briefly my story with you tonight. So let me take you back in time, 26 years to my life when I was 12 years old. Now, I know you're doing the math. Yes, I'm 38, and I know you're thinking, geez, you don't look a day over 25. Thank you. But back then when I was 12 years old, I had definite plans what I was going to do with my life. And from the time I could talk, I had my heart set on being a vet. So everything I did was focused on becoming a vet. And I just got into a selective agricultural high school, so that was well on track. Aside from that, I was an athlete. I ran every distance representatively from the 100 to the cross country. I played softball in summer. I played soccer in winter. But back then, that was when girls didn't play soccer. So I actually fought like hell, and a friend and I ended up being the first girls ever to play soccer in the boys' teams at our school. So it's awesome seeing, thank you, how far women's sport has come now, and to sort of be pioneering in a way all the way back then. But all those plans that I had for my life got completely turned upside down. It was a hot Sunday afternoon, and I was cooling off in a backyard pool with my younger brother, who was 10, and a couple of other boys around the same age. And being the only girl and being that bit older, I didn't want anything to do with them. So I thought a far more fun thing to do would be just to keep climbing up on the edge and diving in. Now, this was something I did over and over again, familiar pool, but I was a perfectionist. So I wanted to make a perfect dive where I did not splash. So I thought if I held my feet together and I kept my legs straight, I would make a nice, neat dive. So I thought, great, solved this mystery, took a deep breath and dived in. And it felt like any other dive until I went to swim up to the surface and I realised I couldn't move. So here I was, stuck at the bottom of the pool, completely conscious, couldn't feel that anything went wrong, but I couldn't move. So very quickly panic set in because I could only hold my breath for so long and I couldn't get any help. So eventually I had to give in, and as my lungs filled up with water, I blacked out. Eventually my brother realised I wasn't joking, and he actually pulled me out and he raised the alarm for help. And it wasn't until later that night at the 3rd hospital over in intensive care at Royal North Shore Hospital that a doctor came and told me that I broke my neck and drowned and I'd never walk again. So that was obviously a devastating blow, not just for me, but for my family as well. And I felt like my life was over in that moment. I spent 8 weeks flat on my back with sandbags either side of my head. So I went from being this fiercely independent, active, ambitious young woman to being completely dependent on others for everything. Many years on from that, I began to look at what happened, the accident, and I looked at it as an absolutely positive experience and how my life had changed in many positive ways. Now, most people think, how the hell can ending up a quadriplegic and needing a wheelchair for the rest of your life be positive? But when people spend time with me, they quickly realise that I'm truly happy with how my life's panned out and where it's going. Now, ultimately, that came down to a choice. I had to decide, do I let that make my life better or do I let it ruin my life? And obviously, I chose to make my life better. And that came down to taking responsibility. And ultimately, you can take responsibility in any moment. It's a decision. If you see something in your life you're not happy with, make a decision you want something better. And from there, all things are possible. All the things that have happened in my life that have been really amazing have come down to the ability to say yes and figure out how to do it later. And most recently, I've had another one of those experiences where I was approached through LinkedIn with an offer of an acting role in an indie film. And I've never acted in my life before, but I said yes. And on Sunday, I had my first day on set. I've got a lead role, and somehow I've ended up being an actress. So say yes more often, you never know where it may lead. Dealing with the sports issue was a much bigger battle. When I was in hospital, I had a lot of time to think. And my 12-year-old self, I made a pact that I was never going to play sport again because I couldn't play it like I used to. And other than a few moments of being embarrassed by how slow and uncoordinated I was, I kept that up for 22 years. And a few days after my 34th birthday, I had this urge come from God knows where that it was time to get fit. And it's amazing when you make an intention that the universe conspires to help you to make it happen. And within days, I saw an ad for a Paralympic talent search. So I thought that's a good place to go to try and find something to get fit. But a couple of days before the talent search, I reread the form and it said they were looking for athletes. And I'm like, I'm not an athlete, I'm never going to be an athlete, so I'd better not go. But thankfully my partner at the time encouraged me to go, and I went and I had a crack. I went through that experience. It was very positive, but I didn't think anything of it until 2 weeks afterwards. I got a letter in the mail from the Paralympic Committee that said I showed all the physical attributes to be a potential Paralympian if I chose to pursue it. And I sat there looking at that letter for God knows how long going, shit, I've just spent the last 22 years not even having a crack because I didn't think I was good enough. And in all reality, I was never going to be good enough to be an elite athlete before my accident. And here I was at 34 with an opportunity to represent my country. And I'm like, bang, all of those competitive instincts were completely reignited. So I chose a sport. I started throwing discus. I was throwing discus left-handed because I can't use my right hand properly. I won a state title in South Australia. I won a silver medal at nationals, but I was never going to be good enough to make the leap to international competition. So I changed sports. I started doing track racing, and I've actually missed the last 2 seasons because of major setbacks. But sometimes, you know, the goal stays the same, but the timeline needs to change. We need to be flexible about, you know, how we actually get there and how long it takes. So look, after all that resistance to sport, it's brought much needed balance to my life. There was always something missing, but there was no way I was ever going to admit that sport was it. There you have it, crazy story of my life so far, and being able to turn adversity into an asset over and over again. But the reality is there's been nothing special about me. People come up to me all the time and go, wow, that's inspiring, but I could never do that. But the thing is I haven't had resources. I've been resourceful. Every experience, every extraordinary experience I've had along my life has been the result of making decisions. And every moment of every day you're making decisions, conscious and unconscious. You're living and breathing your very own choose your own adventure book, whether you like it or not. So look, when in any moment you have a choice, and if you're not liking where things are, then make the choice that you want to do something different. You don't have to know what it is or how you're going to get there, just set an intention. So next time you're feeling overwhelmed by things not going to plan, I really want you to just stop and ask yourself, how can you look at that experience that seemed so negative in the short term? How can you look at it with excitement rather than dread? Because you never know what chapter of your life that experience might end up writing. Thank you.